Okay, so this lecture looks at sort of the situation in what's left of Outremer as things continue to deteriorate after the Battle of Hattin and the loss of Jerusalem. And then the next two Crusades, which kind of happen almost in tandem, the Fifth and Sixth Crusades. As we get towards these later Crusades, scholars differ a little bit on the numbers. So do be careful when you're sort of talking about the different Crusades that you sort of align with what we're talking about here so that things are clear. So, beginning with the situation up in the north, this is really messy business, and I'm just going to try and be super simplistic. So in 1187, Raymond III of Tripoli, who we saw as regent for Baldwin IV, and then one of the primary commanders at Hattin. So Raymond dies, and he does not have any direct descendants. The person he decides to make his heir is his godson, who is actually the son of the Prince of Antioch, or one of the sons of the Prince of Antioch. Things get a little messy, and that sort of inheritance is challenged. There are several different periods of civil war until about 1200. In 1201, Bohemond IV sort of emerges as the victor, and he then is going to control Tripoli and Antioch for the next decade or so. There is a sort of a brief attempt to challenge his control from within Tripoli as well as from within Antioch, but then eventually he sort of reestablishes it. And in 1233, when he dies, he's succeeded by his son Bohemond V. Obviously, important because now you have Antioch and Tripoli under the control of a single person, and each of those in and of itself is quite a challenge. And so increasingly forced to entrust the military orders with defense, particularly of the frontier areas around them, as well as entrusted with a lot of the castles like Crac des Chevaliers, which you can see on the map here. So as long as they're fighting each other, they're not really able to deal with the challenges from local Muslims, Armenians, and Byzantines. The situation in Jerusalem is equally messy and again, really complicated. So I'll try and keep things simple. So you had, remember, Sibylla is the daughter of Amalric. She is married to Guy. She had a son, Baldwin V, but Baldwin V dies, so then Sibylla and Guy become queen and king. He's only king through her. When she dies then, his right to continue to rule is challenged by Conrad of Montferrat. Conrad has come down from Italy. He's married Isabella. Isabella was Sibylla's half-sister, so she is the next direct descendant of the kings of Jerusalem. Through her, Conrad claims the right to rule. So when Richard I is in the Holy Land, in 1192, he has a council at Acre to adjudicate this succession dispute. And so what he says is Isabella is the rightful heir, so she should get the kingdom of Jerusalem. So Conrad, along with her, becomes king. And then Guy is granted the island kingdom of Cyprus. Unfortunately, just a couple of weeks after that decision is made, Conrad is assassinated, probably by the Nizari. And so now this just sort of opens up the whole can of worms again. To compound things, when Conrad is killed, Isabella is pregnant, so she's expecting his child. Eventually, shortly after that, in May, Henry of Champagne, so a nobleman from Western Europe, comes down. He gets approval from the royal court to marry Isabella, which he does on May. And shortly after that, Isabella gives birth to Conrad's child, which is Maria. So you do have Isabella ruling with Henry, and then at least one heir to the throne in the form of Maria. This is an image here of Conrad and Isabella getting married. So it looks as if things have stabilized. So Henry of Champagne, very capable, ruling as king. Unfortunately, in 1197, he dies. He actually falls off a balcony. Like the balcony crumbles and he falls to his death. This is him here when he's marrying Isabella. So Isabella, once again, is a widow. Once again, the royal council negotiates to have her married. She has very little say in any of this. And so Amory of Lusignan, this is Guy's brother, has come down. And so he then marries Isabella and is going to claim the throne of Jerusalem as a result of that marriage. Shortly after that, Isabella dies. Her daughter Maria is declared queen. She's 13 years old. John of Brienne, another sort of noble from Western Europe, who has come down and is now part of the mix, eventually marries Maria, and through Maria claims the throne. And then in 1212, Maria dies in childbirth. Her daughter is Yolande, and so Yolande then becomes the next sort of queen, and we'll pick that up later. In the meantime, John of Brienne is declared regent to rule in her stead. So what does all this matter for? Constant turnover. Every time they think they have a new king in place to provide stability, he dies. And then the other thing of note is you'll notice like the lack of male children. So this need then to find a man to marry the heir to the throne when the throne is female just creates a whole nother sort of round of complications and questions. In the meantime, the Pope has been busy organizing another crusade. So this is Innocent III again. So he clearly hasn't learned his lesson from the Fourth Crusade. Innocent III perhaps is trying to redeem himself at the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215. This is a very large council, lots of abbots and priors and members of sort of secular authorities. Deal with a number of different issues, but amongst those is a call for another crusade. Once again, he is promised to sort of fund and provision and finance this expedition for at least 3 years. He just sort of opens the floodgates. He wants everybody to come. Women, children, married men no longer have to get permission from their wives. He sort of demands monthly processionals throughout the streets of Europe in support of the crusade effort. And then he declares a 4-year peace, so no one can go to war against anyone within Western Europe for the next 4 years at the risk of excommunication. The plan is on June 1st, everyone is going to depart. They're going to meet up in Brindisi or Messina, which is in Sicily, and then head to the Levant or the Latin East. And in part then, he himself was going to sort of bless this crusade, but he dies on July 16th, so right before sort of the planned actual departure, and then the next pope takes over. So who are the participants? One of the people who takes vows in 1215 is this person. This is Frederick II. He is the King of Sicily. He is also the Holy Roman Emperor. He is known in Latin as Stupor Mundi, which sounds like a pejorative nickname, but it's not. It means the wonder of the world. He grows up mostly in Sicily because that's where his mother is from, and he is extraordinarily well educated. He is very sort of culturally advanced. He speaks at least 5 languages, including Arabic. And he also sort of is really interested in intellectual pursuits. So he studies medicine, law, philosophy. Sicily is one of the rare places left in Western Europe where you still have a fair amount of religious diversity. So you would encounter Muslims, you would encounter Jews, you would encounter Christians. And it's relatively tolerant. And so this sort of informs in part Frederick's attitude towards the Muslims when he does go on crusade. He also adopts a lot of what are considered sort of Eastern practices. So in terms of how he dresses, how he conducts his court, he has a harem, sort of in line with some Eastern practices. In 1215, he takes a vow but he has issues to tend to because both of his parents died young. He grew up as the ward of Pope Innocent III. But then as he becomes of age, increasingly, he and Pope Innocent III begin to clash, particularly over control of his territory in Sicily, as well as his position as the Holy Roman Emperor. So he takes his vows in 1215. He does not participate on the Fifth Crusade. And this is part of why this numbering gets sort of messed up. Some people consider him that, some people don't. We're not. So he takes his vows, but he does not go. The people who do go, the primary leaders, are Andrew, the King of Hungary, and Leopold, the Duke of Austria. And so you can see them pictured respectively here, not terribly well, but these are the only contemporary depictions that we have of them. So in 1217, they follow the plan. They sail to the city of Acre, which is sort of the new capital now that they no longer have control of Jerusalem. This is actually a perfect time for them to take advantage of some division within the Muslim world. So when Saladin dies, he divides his lands up between his two sons, but then his brother actually overthrows those two sons and seizes control. So there is some sort of opportunity here for the Crusaders to take advantage of that. When the two Crusaders show up, they're met by John of Brienne, who is the king of Jerusalem through his wife and then stepdaughter, and then Bohemond of Antioch. One of the things that they do accomplish is they built a new fortress of Atlik for the Templars. But more than that, there's just a lot of division about what they're going to do moving forward. They remain pretty close to Acre. There are a few sort of small-scale skirmishes around Acre, but they don't really come up with a vision or a plan of attack. And then eventually, after sort of lingering for some time, they're kind of waiting for Frederick to show up, but they're not really sure if he's going to. Andrew and Leopold ultimately return to their homes, though they do leave some of their knights with John of Brienne. John of Brienne and his troops then sail to Damietta. So they're following this plan of attack that they're still sort of using from Richard I. And Richard I says, after his experience, if you want to recapture Jerusalem, you have to go through Egypt. You need to control Egypt, or you don't have a really reliable base of operations. So they try and blockade the city of Damietta. Damietta is on the coast in that sort of plain into the heart of Egypt where the Nile River is. So it's sort of the gateway to inner Egypt, poised along the sort of Nile River Delta. And so what the Egyptians have done is you can't access Damietta because there's this long chain that runs from one side of the Nile to another, and it has towers on either side of it. And so it's a very effective defensive mechanism. In August of 1218, they managed to come up with a super clever way to put some towers on boats and then attack the chain towers simultaneously. And they are able to then sort of dismantle this defensive mechanism, which does give them access to then moving inward up the Nile to Damietta. And you can see this is sort of depicted here. The other thing that happens is at the time, the person ruling Damietta, Safaddin, dies, and so he's succeeded by Al-Kamil. And so Al-Kamil knows that the Crusaders are coming, so he finds a way to sort of block the Nile so that they can't get too far inland to where he is in Cairo. Eventually, after a very long extended siege, they do manage to capture the city. It takes 18 months. The Crusaders themselves are very low on provisions. What they discover when they enter the city is that extensive siege has just absolutely decimated the population. Over 80,000 Egyptians themselves have died of disease and starvation. There are about 30,000 who are still alive. They're very, very ill. The city itself, however, is the source of a lot of wealth. So the Crusaders then spend a lot of time just sort of going through the city and confiscating everything they can find that's that has some sort of financial value. But then the next step is not clear, and they're very divided over what should happen next. The loss of Damietta completely rattles Al-Kamil. He realizes he is not in a strong position, and so there's a lot of panic. He sends an embassy to John of Brienne and tries to negotiate for some sort of truce. And he literally promises them almost everything. So he promises to return the True Cross, which was captured at Hattin, though we do know that they don't actually know where it is at this time. So if the Crusaders agree to that, they're going to have to search for it. He promises to return the city of Jerusalem, all prisoners taken over the course of the hostilities over the past decade or so. He's going to keep he's going to keep Damietta and the castles of Shobak and Karak. And in part, this truce then is sort of taken to the Crusaders, and the papal legate Pelagius says, you know what, no, don't agree to it. There was a prophecy that was shared with me, and I know that we're going to be successful in everything we do. This is settling too soon. The Hospitallers are also opposed to the agreement. They want to continue to press on with sort of military pressure. John of Brienne and the Europeans who've joined the crusade think they should accept these terms, but ultimately the sort of opinion of the papal legate and the military orders sort of overrules them, and so they reject Al-Kamil's offer. The next step then is to march further inward to try and get to Cairo. They reach the city of Mansoura and they camp there, and you can see it sort of along the Nile. For some reason, there is some delay in terms of where they want to go next. So instead of sort of pressing onwards, they sort of stop. And over the course of time, then you have these men who are sort of newly wealthy because of the gains at Damietta, a lot of gambling they're engaging in. The papal legate keeps yelling at them because they're engaging with local prostitutes. Al-Kamil is able to rally some Muslim reinforcements, and some also come from Baghdad. The Crusaders have not fully sort of prepared for the topography, and in part they camp in a plain which is dry, but it's only dry because one part of the Nile has been dammed up, and that's going to be a problem later on. And increasingly, as they continue to delay, they run through the supplies that they managed to bring with them from Damietta, and their situation is becoming less and less advantageous. Eventually, Al-Kamil's troops show up. One of the things that he does is he opens up this dam and he floods this whole area where the Crusaders had been camped, and they're forced to flee very quickly, leaving everything behind. The other thing that Al-Kamil does is he cuts off their access to their ships, so they begin their retreat back to Damietta, but their way is blocked by a contingent of the Muslim army. And so on August 24th, the Crusader army is surrounded. They're forced to surrender almost to a man. They're forced to relinquish control of Damietta, and as you can imagine, the capture of Damietta caused enormous rejoicing. Everyone was super optimistic after the loss of Damietta and sort of another crusade effort with nothing to show for it. There is a lot of blame that goes around, a lot of finger pointing at John of Brienne for not coming up with a plan at Mansoura, a lot of finger pointing at the papal legate Pelagius for not taking Al-Kamil's offer, but in any case, that is the end of the Fifth Crusade. So in the meantime, Frederick has been trying to deal with his affairs back in Western Europe so that he can eventually fulfill his vow. He's coming under a lot of pressure from the Pope because of these delays. And so eventually he and the Pope come to an agreement in June 1225 with the Treaty of San Germano. Excuse me. He promises to depart by 1227. He's going to be gone. He's going to stay for at least 2 years. He's going to bring a sizable force with him. He's going to pay for all of this himself, of course. And if he does not follow through with this, he will be excommunicated by the Pope. So additional pressure to get Frederick to sort of move forward with his plans and fulfill his oath. In 1223, he manages to arrange his marriage to Isabella. Isabella's name is also Yolande. So just to confuse things a little bit further. So this is Yolande. So this is that last heir, direct heir of Jerusalem. She was the daughter of Maria. And so she now marries Frederick, though she through her, Frederick is able to claim the title and the crown, the kingdom of Jerusalem. Together, they do have a son, Conrad, though Isabella and Conrad stay in Sicily while Frederick continues on. So in 1227, with his large army, he arrives in Brindisi. There is a lot of overcrowding in this city. Brindisi is on the coast of Italy. There's a lot of overcrowding because all of Frederick's forces are there. It is a typical sort of point of departure for a lot of the Crusades, but because of the time of the year, there's a lot of illness. Frederick himself is ill. He gets malaria. And so this forces a delay. Isabella and Conrad also get malaria. And so he sort of delays his departure a little bit longer. Gregory the Ninth, the current pope, does not buy Frederick's explanation for why he's delayed his departure. He thinks he's just dragging his feet. So he excommunicates him. However, in 1228, Frederick departs. This is an image of the Pope excommunicating Frederick. If you're excommunicate, you also lose your right to rule. And so that's why they're sort of taking his crown off. Though Frederick disregards it all. In September, he arrives in the city of Tyre. He has a real problem getting support from any of the locals, in part because of that excommunication issue. According to the terms of excommunication, no one else is supposed to have any interaction with him. He also is very sort of arrogant. He believes that everyone there should sort of immediately acknowledge his authority. They do not. And in fact, in part because sort of his background, the fact that he speaks Arabic to some of the locals, there is a lot of suspicion about his intentions. He certainly does not share the sort of anti-Muslim sentiment that seems to motivate a lot of the Crusaders. And so that also leads some people to sort of question whether or not he's genuinely interested in any sort of a crusade. What Frederick is able to do is he's able to negotiate a truce with Al-Kamil. So once again, the position within the Muslim world is sort of weakened because of some internal divisions. And so Al-Kamil feels like he is willing to sacrifice Jerusalem if that allows him to consolidate control of Egypt and his possessions sort of further inward near Baghdad. And so according to the truce, and you can see the two of them depicted here, Frederick has the blue and the red. They negotiate a truce where Jerusalem, control of the city, is going to be ceded to Frederick for at least 10 years, 5 months, and 40 days. They do have to raise the walls, and they cannot rebuild the walls. So it can't be fortified moving forward. And he has to agree to allow all Muslims and Jews living within the city to stay within the city. In return for that, then, Frederick is going to depart. This to Frederick seems like an excellent resolution. He didn't have to lose many men. He didn't have to engage in an extended struggle. And he got exactly what every crusade has attempted to do since the loss of Jerusalem in Hattin, which is control of Jerusalem. However, A lot of people aren't really happy with the way this plays out. Frederick is surprised. He eventually goes to Jerusalem to sort of establish control of it. He has no intention of staying there. He has to get back to the Holy Roman Empire, so he puts some people in place to govern it in his absence. What he does discover, however, is that there is a lot of anger, particularly amongst the Christians and other crusaders, for his refusal to engage in any sort of military battle. So ultimately, the outcome is not at all what Frederick had anticipated. The Pope, in particular, not only refuses to lift the excommunication on Frederick, but he places the entire city of Jerusalem under interdict, which means that everybody within Jerusalem is excommunicated. It's one of the most powerful tools that the Pope has. The Templars and the Hospitallers are really upset about the way things played out in particular. They do not agree with this sort of peaceful negotiation. They feel like there should have been, given the size of Frederick's armies and the resources, at least an attempt to militarily conquer some of this territory. John of Brienne, the king of Jerusalem, is upset because now that Frederick has married Isabella/Yolande, and he claims to be king of Jerusalem through her, John of Brienne has been relegated. He is no longer even regent, and so he makes an alliance with the Pope. They attack Frederick's lands back in Sicily. In part because of this, Frederick has to leave the Latin East. According to local reports, as he does, so he's leaving sort of where he had been staying, and he is sort of making his way to his ship to depart, and the local people sort of throw camel dung and other sort of nasty parts of animals at him as he leaves, and they boo and they hiss. So not exactly the outcome personally, the sort of respect or the admiration, but at the end of the day, since the First Crusade, this is the only crusade that actually successfully achieved its ends, which is control of Jerusalem.